Okay. Okay, so welcome everyone to another episode. I find myself in a very interesting, unique, and strange situation. Just an announcement to the viewers, I have a smoking habit. When I give these talks, I'm smoking a lot through them. And so they're having their toll, and my intent is to somehow detach myself from this habit of giving these talks. So that's the intent. This doesn't mean this is the last episode, but I don't know, I should attempt. My intent should be to, take a break from these. But anyways, for today, I wanted to speak, and I was thinking about this idea of decisions and attitudes. And then this poetic idea of when the soul remembers. And so what is even the idea of the soul, and what can even that idea remember? Okay, so I'm opening up the notepad. The viewers should see it on the screen. Okay. I don't get it. Why isn't this song playing? Sorry guys, just hold on a second. I think I gotta Alright guys, I don't know what's happening. I think I gotta change my location, so just bear with me, I guess. Okay. Okay. Finally, there we go. What can a temporary being say about the remembrance of the soul? You know, if the viewers look at the screen, I've opened the notepad. I'm gonna type parts of this episode. So, if we look at the sentence, contextual decisions, revolutionize, revolutionize attitudes. So, what do I mean by contextual? Human understanding begins with a concept found within a context. This revolutionizes the attitude of the concept, the type of concept the person thinks it is, right? Because let me say it like this, you know. There was this poem by this Sufi mystic named Rumi. And he says, when I was younger, I wanted to change the world. But now that I am older, I change myself. And for this guy, it was as if he was trying to change the context, but then he realized he needs to change the concept. You know, it was like the other way. When I say a contextual decision, I'm pretty much saying how you are deciding where you are, or what your decision of where you are is. Okay? For example, when we look at a religious person, let's say a secular person, a religious person, and a spiritual person. The secular person is in their context is just a materialistic universe. That's it. When we look at the religious person, their context is a subjective universe. When you look at the spiritual person, the context of the spiritual person is that the world is no longer an idea. You see, why is it, I thought about this, that why is it in religion, certain religions, there is the idea of surrendering the ego or submitting the ego to a greater will, right? So when it comes to a decision, so I pretty much shared the view of the context concept. By the way, anybody who wants to understand anything, this is the fastest way. The way I learn things is that I find a concept and I'm like, how did the concept come about? That's its context. Or where is the concept found? That's its current context. So by contextual, human understanding begins with the concept found within a context. By changing the context, we are redefining the concept. So when it comes to decisions, now I'm someone who I speak about the inner realms and outer realms, which is another way of saying you can have a physical decision or a non-physical decision, or even somebody can have this argument, all decisions are non-physical before they become physical, right? But what I mean is that a person can, let's say, decide in the outer realms to go sit in a car, or the person before going in the car, they can just close their eyes and just see themselves like as if they've decided internally the event has taken place. For me, I came across this YouTuber named Aaron Daughtry, I believe. And it was like a video, it was a short video, and he was saying something very profound, which the moment I implemented, it actually like worked. Okay, and so he was saying that when it comes to the intent of manifesting reality, a person has to have three dimensions aligned. And it's in some sense, you have to have your thoughts, actions, and feelings aligned to what you want. Okay, so in some sense, that alignment, in my experience, came from a decision. I'm someone who, isn't married at the moment, but I have an interest, and I was talking to somebody who was giving me advice, and they were saying, you got to make a decision, man. If you make the decision, and then everything happens, and then it's like the reality adjusts around it. But the thing is, it's not just a conceptual decision. It's not just like a conception. It's kind of like the type of world you see yourself going to in your inner realm suggests how you feel about reality, So when it comes to decisions, I would say, through the insight of that YouTuber, a decision is an acceptance of reality. Usually, if you have an inferiority complex, you probably don't feel you can make a decision, and others or the world is going to make a decision for you. You see, when it comes to decision, here I'll share a bunch of trios. So we had emotions, thoughts, and then we had actions. And I would come here and say there's a decision you can make about yourself, there's a decision you can make about others, and there's a decision you can make about the world, or experientially, all of these can be realigned. There's been times in my life where I've conceptually lived, but I've had an experience that has realigned my perception to realize the conception was unnecessary. Do you know? It's like how do I say it? When it comes to the domain of feeling, this is what I have noticed, that anytime I want to when it comes to emotions they appear out of nowhere. I don't know how to say it. But anyways, so you can make a decision about yourself. In 2014, I decided to give 10,000 talks in this lifetime. That was a decision I made. The moment I made that decision, the moment I accepted it, and the moment I realized, okay, if I'm going to give 10,000 talks, then giving one talk shouldn't be a big deal. Do you know? And it was as if that I made a decision, about myself, that and this decision opened up where in some sense I met so many people who were drawn by the Mr.Within talks, and at the same time, let me say it like this, if you were to, how would I say it? Just keep this in mind. You can make a decision about yourself, you can make a decision about others, or you can make a decision about the world, which includes the self and others. If you make a decision that the world is transcendental, then the self and others in it are transcendental, right? The world is the context, the self is the concept, and we could say others are like semi-concepts between the world and the self. That means when we look at others, it's kind of weird. They kind of look like ourselves, they're members of our species, but they're also a part of the world. Right? This is the bizarre thing about consciousness, right? Anything it experiences outside of itself is being considered world, right? So what that means is when I look at a tree and outside and I'm like, yo, that tree is part of the world. It's the world I'm looking at, right? Or if I look at a mountain, it's a world I'm looking at. But when I look at a person, it's still a world I'm looking at, but it is a very specified system. You see, there's a biological system which it has its own mind, and there's a cognitive system which our free will engages in its administration. But once the free will realizes there are limits to how it can be, in order to pass its own limitation, it needs the authorization outside of its ego. So what that means is when you're a sense of self and you want this sense of self to do something or get somewhere, if that sense of self doesn't have a permission outside of itself, it doesn't feel it can change. And by the way, dear viewers, there's 5 people listening. If there's anything you want to add, or if you think I'm missing something or whatnot, the comment section exists for that purpose. So anyways, the concept of contextual, the idea of the context is very important, and then making a decision about the context, okay? And I don't know, sometimes in my life, when it comes to actions, yeah, those are relatively easy to decide, because it's a manifest thing, right? When it comes to thoughts, it's also easy to decide. For example, when I give these talks, I decide upon a title, and then that title is real to me. It has imagery in my inner realms, and then I have something to talk about. So anyways, we have the contextual part. I'm going to highlight it here. So I've spoken about that. We come to decisions. Spoken about that. Now we go to revolutionize. Revolution. So the idea of revolution, I remember hearing that somebody was in contrasting evolution with revolution. Just a simple way to remember it, that evolution is gradual and takes a long time. Revolutions are instantaneous changes. So when I'm saying you make a decision about the context, it's kind of like you're making a decision about the world you're in, and instantly the concept changes. So that's it pretty much. That's the way I'm using the term revolutionize. That means you make a decision about your world, and then the concept has to acknowledge a different value. So then we come to attitudes. Approaches to reality, preconsidered expectations of the moment's progress, let's say. And the best thing I could say about an attitude, it's an approach based on feeling, I feel, right? Mainly a person's attitude. Like, the way I treat human beings is that I say, okay, we have one, like a multiplayer online video game where we've all logged into this elemental 3D space-time continuum map, like a public server, a public existential server in front of our eyes, and behind our eyes there's a private experiential server. Okay, the sentence is obvious, right? Whoever you are, try this out for one day, change the context. Like, usually people wake up and they want to be a new concept, or a lot of people are attracted to people who allow them to be new concepts, right? But in reality, if you realize how you're being a context, you'll realize that you have special, probably in your, okay, so think of it this way. A child is born and waves of information hit this child. The first wave of information becomes the child's beliefs. The second wave of information, imagine, becomes the child's doubt. The third wave of information becomes the child's certainty, and it keeps going and keeps going. And so literally we are waves of information are hitting us. Okay, so when it comes to the context of reality, even though I'm saying you make a decision, if you don't have an experience, you won't really have it verified for you. I'll give you an example. In 2011, this was the most revolutionary, one of my most unique, you can say spiritual experiences or metaphysical experiences. Pretty much I was sitting on this rock in this park in Toronto, Canada called Edwards Gardens, and there was this rock and this, like, something that was like a stream and a river, like in between. Okay, so I go sit on this rock, and the water's in some sense passing me, and so I'm seated on the rock cross-legged, and the water's from behind me going forward, and I'm just looking at the water sitting on this rock in the middle of the river. And as I was sitting there just contemplating reality, for the first time it occurred to me, like, I was asking myself, like who am I? Like, what is this? Why am I, And then there came a moment where I asked myself, who am I? And my mind gave an answer. But then right after, I asked another question, the same question for myself, and my mind gave a different answer. And then I suddenly realized that it's as if, even though I have been acknowledging that I'm an individual, but really what's going on is in the outer realm, let's say a stable existential position, but in the inner realm, very transitory moments. What that means is the brain is self-simulating itself multiple times throughout the day. That means it's resetting itself. Do you know? I think actually every time we blink, the brain's like, where'd the world go? And then resimulation, maybe, So I had an experience where I noticed that I am watching how I am being an idea. That was the most revolutionary thing. And then I realized, how have I been acting like a freaking fool, that I'm all my thoughts, right? When the thoughts have been coming and going the whole time. Do you know, we are actually, the Upanishads say it very incredibly. The Upanishads say the seer of the seen, S-E-E-N. The seer of the seen is unseen. So what that means is there is something looking out through our eyes that is aware of the change, but it doesn't associate with the change. It's very close to this saying that seems to be attributed to Christ, where he says to be in the world but not of it, right? That is the secret of consciousness. It is here, but it's not of here. Why do you think we stepped out of the concrete jungles, began to speak, and are trying to get out of this planet, go to other planets, right? It's as if it's like we were never from here, even though we were here, from here. Do you know? So it seems like man is existentially a citizen in the outer realms, but internally he's a citizen of another dimension. Do you know what this means? Is that the mind is non-locally experiencing location, to the degree that when you go into deep sleep, all your beliefs, all your thoughts, you think you're an atheist, you think you're a theist, adorable. Go to deep sleep and you'll see that there is an absence of psychological process, and you awaken. And really, our psychology is how we have logged into an acceptance of the context of reality. Because what could freedom imply? Imagine if you don't understand the concept. That means if you don't understand the world you're in, you'll be a self endlessly roaming in it. But if you understand that this world is just one room out of many rooms, then your attitude to reality changes. You know, I'm a person who, there's moments where, especially because I smoke, there's moments where I have these fears of death, you know. And then I think about, like, yo, what if I'm gonna die? What if suddenly, I'm dismissed before I finish the 10,000 talks? What if, the universe is like, okay, you talked enough and takes me out of here? I thought of all of this, and then I was like, but what is afraid within me? If I am not a thought, if I have experienced my body change, if I have experienced my thoughts change, then why would I be afraid of them changing again? Do you see? It's as if we have been trained from the beginning of our lives to accept change. So what I'm trying to say is that my experiential context of reality has turned into this a kind of first-person unknown viewer, to the point that if I even die, I don't know what died. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I can see the shape, I can see the objective, but in some ways I feel I cannot be what I see. I don't know how to say this. It's like, imagine you see a tree and you're not inside the tree. Like, if you were the tree, you know what I'm saying? It's like, here's the argument. Human existence shouldn't be able to be conscious of itself. It shouldn't be. But the fact that it is suggests that there's something else. So I would make this claim that in this dimension, we're an existential entity, but there's something else. There's an invisible component. It appears. It's like consciousness is being live streamed. Isn't it hilarious? I'm given a live stream, and it's like my the consciousness giving the live stream is live stream. Yeah. I don't know, guys. There's been moments where I've had existential fear. There's moments where I've had an experiential fear, and this fear has been from both sides. Let me tell you what I mean. That means some people think that just having this idea that you're an eternal being is like, that's just a simple idea. Very, 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 just an idea you can easily accept. But there is something that it's like, if we were eternal, what's the point of action? And if we are temporary, what's the point of continuous action? So I've reached this point where, through all the angles I've looked at life so far, this is fairly recent, this realization, where I was like, okay, universe, you have brought me into, like, oh, nature, you have brought me into a world where there's infinite, so many angles, all you can see, buffet of perception and viewpoints. And I was like, okay, out of all of these, how do I know which one is the one? Do you know, or which one is necessary? And for a second I thought that, you know, it could be that internally I am how do I say it? I have experienced moments where I feel the unknown self within me has remembered an unknown world. But the worlds of the outer realms, they're slow. The worlds of the inner realms are way more faster, way more freedom of projection. But the awareness where they're both in doesn't have a shape to do anything. So it's kind of like a part of us can't do anything, but a part of us is only here to do things, you know? It's like the body is dynamic, but the awareness is strangely like static somehow. So, a person experiences reality beyond the physical. The context of reality changes based on their experience, so it's like an instantaneous decision. When you experience something, you see its reality. We could have this attitude where we say the body is the concept and the mind is its context. We can have an approach where the idea is the concept and the unknown experiencer, that is the awareness of the whole moment, is the context. It's like when you realize reality is not just an image, then you kind of feel like you don't know what to do as an image. And so in my experience, I reached a point where I was like, okay, if I didn't create this world, if this world has a presence that surpasses the boundaries of my ideological grasp of reality, do you know, I would say 2023 has been a year where I have understood faith again. I have understood why faith is really crucial, and not just like religious, a contextual religious faith, but just a sort of faith in that, oh my God, the world is also unknown. To me, this has been the greatest discovery, that unknown beings are temporarily acting like they know themselves. But the essence of how we are unknown, what if we are not even individual? What if what is within the moment is just pure presence? You know, when I look at space, it has a presence. When I look at matter, sure, it could have personality. It has a shape, format. So let's deconstruct the subtitle, and I think I'm kind of done here. I don't know what else there is. Subtitle. All right. So, when suggests a moment in time, the idea of the soul suggests that which is beyond an object and subject. Time is a subject that is found to be valid when objects change in space. So when is suggesting a moment in time in the space-time continuum, the soul suggests that which is beyond time. And then when it comes to remembrance, remembrance is expansion of certainty through the past. Well, I shouldn't say through the past. Let me say it. So pretty much the subtitle is saying when a timeless being in time remembers itself outside of time. Okay? Because remembrance has to do with sequential awareness. Okay? To be honest, the human mind, when we wake up in the morning, when we log into reality, it's just sequences of decisions. Really what a human being is actually a decision sequence. And you know what I feel is going on? I feel that the world is way more full than we consider. Or what else can I say here? Here, another way I could say is the artificial remembering the original, or the original remembering the primordial. So what does this mean? If we were in the ultimate reality, right, then we wouldn't need to do anything to get there. But because human beings feel they got to do things to get somewhere, right, we have it's like nouns suddenly discovered verbs, you know, or the noun realized it's actually a verb. Remembrance is different. I mean, there's moments where I can remember inner events from yesterday and all of this, but there's moments where I visualize things in the future, but then from that visualization of the future, I try to remember. So I'll give you an example. So I try to visualize 1,000 years ahead, what would civilization look like, but then from that inner realm 1,000-year visualization of that sense of self I'm perceiving, it's imagine I visualize back 500 years from the 1,000-year projection into the future. So I try to remember, I'll give you an example. Let me say this again. It's kind of like when I'm trying to remember something, it's an inner realm event. If somebody says, Mr. Within, have you remembered, have you realized have you found the original Earth? Or if somebody says, Mr. Within, have you realized your presence as a being? To me, it's like I've had moments where I have felt like I am the main event of life, and there has been moments where I have felt I am not the main event. And strangely, those moments when I have accepted I am not the main event, life has made me the main event. I don't know why life works like this, but when you don't want something, it's like you have the perfect mindset to have it. I shouldn't say you have the perfect mindset to have it, but it's as if something, I think sometimes events in nature have a sort of karma to them and have a sort of will, right? Like we may think like a snow falling on like a tree branch doesn't have a will, right? But there seems to be a force, there seems to be an invisible caretaking force over nature. A presence beyond the personality of an idea that thinks it can conceptually just engage reality. It's like it's pretty much two worlds, just like we have two eyes that see the same. We have an inner realm and outer realm that's being the same moment. But once you realize they're being the same moment, then the significance you've given to each changes, right? There's an incredible quote from Swami Krishnananda where he says, once you see the inseparability of the individual activity and the cosmic activity, meditation stops. That means, oh you who are a truth seeker, oh you who have ran after truth, have you ever thought that what you want might be something that you feel you don't deserve? You know, because there's a difference between wanting something that you feel you don't have. So part of your brain, if you want something, like it's accepting it doesn't have. But if you feel you already are there, do you know, like when this might sound strange, but when I give these talks, Mr. Within talks, some part of me feels like I've already given, like I've already done this before. Like there's a comfort. And so we are part of the destiny of the greatness of humanity. You know? It's a multi-purpose reality. A person can have visions for their self based on past, present, future. They can have a sort of vision for others based on the past, present, future. And they can have a vision of the world, do you know? There was a time where I have, like, in my inner realms, usually I can translate myself, convert myself into a geometrical being, and then when I move in my inner realms, I don't get attached to what I see. But if I choose to be human behind my eyes, then the relationships and the interactions also humanize. So this is the thing. I don't know how many people behind their eyes are human to themselves, and how many people behind their eyes, they are a creature of attention. Like in front of my eyes, I'm a body. Behind my eyes, I'm presence. It's like an attention's just being the moment. Whew. The worlds that live in us and the worlds we live in. Can you guys imagine in the future I'm getting married and just like in the middle of, like, you know, after the marriage ceremony I give a talk on marriage, like it's like, oh my god, Mr. Within is podcasting even when he's getting married. Oh my god, like I live stream my marriage in the future, that shit. I don't know, we are a force, right? I mean, if we entertain the sentence that Michelangelo said, where he said, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. To be honest, we are seeing a world, which is the stone, and our free will is setting the angel free from that stone. So this means that on some level, reality doesn't acknowledge its organization, which can prove the unconscious. So what it means is that the unconscious is chaos. The conscious is order. Now, if somebody says, is there order in chaos? It's like the answer is, who do you think gave birth to order? You know, there will come a time in the future where all the good people who have thought there are evil people in this world will realize that every being has an innocence of identifying as attributeless attention with the world. That means if an angel appears in front of me and a demon appears in front of me, I will look at both of them and say, hug each other. Why? Because the moment the human being understands that awareness is not physical, then when we see a physical creature, it's like a physical entity. How can we just treat it as physical? Do you know, there was a time, guys, I cried that I had considered enemies in this world. It broke my own heart that I had been so naive that I had accepted my impressions of others. That was a sort of savageness, you know, where I thought what I saw was the person. But the moment I realized that there is so many angles we never can see about the individual. You know, it's bizarre. It's kind of like we can know ourselves 99.9%. We can know each other 99.9%. But that 1%, 0.1% remains. And so my strategy as a, temporary biological being in a world that seems to be eternally changing, or the change seems to be the only eternal thing. It's kind of like this. All those people who thought that there was, let's say there's an evil... here, I've heard one of the most... If somebody says, Mr.Within, what's the most beautiful thing you've heard about religion? I would say that there's this saying where they say, you might be there when somebody sins, but you might not be there when they repent. And this means as a being, do you know, this means that we have forgotten our home. To be a being, I mean, think about it. We say human being. The human part is shape, form, conditional. The being part is unconditional. I gave a talk a few days ago where I pretty much, this question arose to me and I couldn't even sleep. Where the question was, do I even want to be a being? And then I realized the nature of being is unconditional. So what it means is like, the stone is infinite. Michelangelo says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. It's like inside, it's like from an infinite stone, we're sculpting a finite life. And there will 100% come a time where people will realize fear, the stuff that we feared, like the future generations are not going to even consider. Like back in the day, there was a fear of diseases, right? People would live to the age 25 and they would die. So it was like being a 25-year-old was like, yo, grandpa, you know. Once you experience your presence, you will realize what your personality is relying on. Once you are content with your presence, you have accepted an instantaneous moment where attention and existence are being. If you simply accept this, a lot of complexity will open up to you. A good complexity, meaning that if you don't accept the simple truths, the complexity, how would I say it? Think of it this way, we're starting off simple, we're going to complexity, and let's say we try to go complex, and even if we fail, we revert back to the simplicity we were content with. This is the nature of life. It's showing us that like I feel this plane of existence is like a training ground, so we realize we are not our thoughts, we are not our, it's like it's weird, it's like we're in a world to realize we are not the world, do you know? So then we realize what is it bringing, like what is projecting it, do you know? Yeah, guys, I gotta make this the last talk. Like, I understand there's a poetry, you know, but
talking to people about what you're studying. Well, I'm just jealous of you. Like,
but you know, last night I was thinking that it makes no sense to fear death because it's part of the program. You know, I also had that thought where I was like, okay, I haven't spent time thinking about death, accepting death, just realizing it's actually natural. And so, you know, that sort of perception brought me a bit of contentment. That it's like, yeah, it's something we all go through. You know, it's like just like the basic necessities of life. Like, strangely, for a transcendental being, it's like perhaps, you know, it's you know, it's like a multidimensional being gets bored of being in one dimension. You know, the cool thing is that the advanced civilization, it's the greatest idea. There will be many speakers of it. You know, I'm like the early bird. There's going to come a time where you're going to see all the politicians also talking about the advanced civilization. Right now, the politicians, their consciousness is through an egoic frame. So what that means is that sometimes to be able to understand people, it's kind of strange, but you got to experience moments where you don't feel like a person. Do you know? It's like this world requires a contrast, right? Okay, let's go into a quote tunnel. I'm gonna bring some ancient yogis here. Shankara, yeah, that's the name that comes. Shankara, Adi Shankara. So, dear viewers, this is a quote tunnel. I'm going to read a bunch of quotes about a person in history. And Adi Shankara was a very liberated sage. And so it begins, the quote tunnel. Adi Shankara, do not be proud of wealth, people, relations, and friends or youth. All these are snatched by time in the blink of an eye. Giving up this illusory world, know and attain the supreme. For man can see it. It's in range. The supreme is in range. It's kind of like faith in the potential of humanity. Too easily we have let go of the world's greatness. Too easily we have forgotten about the advancement of humanity. Adi Shankara says reality can be experienced only with the eye of understanding, not just by a scholar. Which is another way of saying what is within you may one day become your commander. Adi Shankara says the world, like a dream, full of attachments and aversions, seems real until the awakening. Adi Shankara says do not look at anybody in terms of friend or foe, brother or cousin. Do not fritter away your mental energies in thoughts of friendship or enmity. Seeking the self everywhere, be amiable and equal-minded towards all, treating all alike. And so guys, this is the perception that you begin to realize the force that is behind your eyes is also behind the eyes of others. And it's another way of saying multiple infinite existences are arising from a singular supreme experience. So what this means is that worlds are found in awareness. They cannot be present alone. Purusha and Prakriti arise together. Consciousness and matter arise together. Sorry, awareness. What that means is it's kind of like Friedrich Nietzsche says, if a tree falls in a forest and there's nobody there to see it or hear it, did the tree fall? Adi Shankara says, knowing that I am different from the body, I need not neglect the body. It is a vehicle that I use to transact with the world. It is the temple which houses the pure self within. Adi Shankara says, even after the truth has been realized, there remains that strong, obstinate impression that one is still an ego, the agent and experiencer. This has to be carefully removed by living in a state of constant identification with the supreme non-dual self. Full awakening is the eventual ceasing of the mental oppressions of being an ego. Yeah, but when you realize you're not an ego, it's like you can use it whenever you want or however you want. You know, it's like, imagine you hold a wrench in your hand and you're a mechanic. If you think the wrench is part of your hand, you might not want to use the wrench. Do you know? But when you realize the wrench is not a part of your hand, you can use different tools. You can have different egos, different archetypal expressions. But the idea is that if you understand the presence of the moment is singular, then it's kind of like when you look into someone else's eyes, you are seeing the same unknown that is behind your own eyes. Adi Shankara says, curb your senses and your mind and see the Lord within your heart. Adi Shankara says, as gold purified in a furnace loses its impurities and achieves its own true nature, the mind gets rid of the impurities of the attributes of delusion, attachment, and purity through meditation and attains reality with a capital R. Adi Shankara says, when your last breath arrives, grammar can do nothing. If you're religious, accept the idea of repentance, you know. But that's not just linguistic. Adi Shankara says, loud speech, profusion of words, and possessing skillfulness in expounding scriptures are merely for the enjoyment of the learned. They do not lead to liberation. Yeah, because it's language, liberation is experiential freedom. See, language is it's like experiencing something indirectly. And like somebody skydiving, that's a direct experience. Somebody reading about skydiving, that's an indirect experience. And Adi Shankara is like saying, if you read about skydiving, it's not like you're going to get the experience of skydiving. So you got to actually dive into the sky, right? So similarly, you got to actually experience your presence beyond your personality. But that's up to you, based on who you are and how you even honor your being. Do you even honor your being, whoever you are listening to me? Have you had moments where you have thanked your existence for its service so far? Have you had a moment where you have bowed to the world? Has there been a moment where you have bowed to the heart of hearts or the world of worlds? Has there been a moment where you have been so grateful that there was nothing you could want because the beauty was present? You see, there are moments where we can just be. They call it Satchidananda. When you realize your consciousness is existence, a bliss arises within you. That bliss inevitably will be a faith in the unknown. And those who do not have a faith in the unknown, none of the ideologies of religion or spirituality are going to make sense to you unless you realize it's unknown. And then your will is going to seek for different strategies. Adi Shankara says, to be free from bondage, the wise person must practice discrimination between oneself and the ego self. By that alone you will become full of joy, recognizing self as pure being, consciousness and bliss. Adi Shankara says, give up identification with the mass of flesh as well as with what thinks it's a mass. Both are intellectual imaginations. Recognize your true self as an undifferentiated awareness, unaffected by time, past, present, or future, and enter peace, which is another way of saying we are the world of the world. The world is happening in us, within us. That means our bodies are happening in the world, but the world is happening in our mind simultaneously.